Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I'd like to talk about improving gay men's relationships, meeting three needs: emotional, sexual, and interpersonal. So in a previous episode, I believe it was episode 41, I cautioned single gay men about their dating skills and avoiding the all too often seen pitfalls of putting the emphasis in dating on the wrong things, such as cash, connections, and, well, cock. So you can hear episode 41 if you want more on that. But as someone in a 19-year gay relationship with my partner and now husband, I always say to clients that the things that seem important during dating aren't really the things that are important that hold up in long-term relationships. Being single and dating can be filled with all kinds of romantic fantasies and idealizations and, just a shift in priorities that don't necessarily play out over time. Relationships over the long term are more serious than that, than just fantasies or some of the pitfalls of dating. The most fundamental function of an interpersonal domestic relationship with a partner or spouse is to get your needs met. And that's true for both partners, getting your needs met through each other, at least some of them. Your needs and your partner's needs can vary widely. In my 29 years in 2021 of providing individual and couples therapy as a gay men's specialist, therapist, and coach, I've certainly seen the variety of styles of gay men's relationships, and they are all over the map. Literally, when I work with guys all over the world, in terms of relationship style, variations on monogamy or consensual non-monogamy, the personalities involved, the cultures that guys come from, and what their needs are. Often I joke that the older I get, the stronger my opinions get, because I see the same mistakes gay men in relationships make that undermine their health and their mental health and their overall well-being over and over again. But I also see the same fundamental strengths that tend to serve a couple well over many years of domestic bliss or close to it by following certain universal practices with guys of all different kinds that I've seen locally in Southern California or Los Angeles or West Hollywood where I practice, but also when I do relationship coaching to guys in other states or other countries. So here today I'd like to share some observations on how gay male couples succeed with relationships that are both long and enduring, as well as high levels of reported satisfaction, which are often the two criteria we use to evaluate your relationships. The duration, but also the quality. You don't just want it to be a long slog, that's frustrating. You want it to have a long duration and also a high quality of satisfaction. So your needs that need to be met for your relationship to be both enduring and satisfying usually come down to these three: the emotional, the sexual, and the interpersonal. So let's discuss each of these in turn. Number one, the emotional. Getting your emotional needs met from a partner or spouse is probably the most important, because this is a factor that would be relevant from the time that you meet, even having a good first date together in the bloom of youth, all the way, if you make it, to an old age and sharing your lives until literally death do you part. And I've worked with gay widowers, and that's a whole different topic. Maybe we'll do an episode on gay widowers who have lost a partner to death in some way. But just like in straight relationships, gay men's relationships really start with meeting your emotional needs on an everyday routine basis, keeping you happy more or less day after day. One somewhat antiquated term for a same-sex partner, just like lover used to be, as they said oftentimes in the 60s and 70s, is longtime companion. So at the very least, your partner is a companion, usually, but not always, to share a home with, an apartment, a condo, a flat, a house, a ranch, a farm, a trailer, whatever your home is. Having a companion for your daily routine of sleeping together, having meals, and domestic life outside of work. And that's just fundamental. However modest versus however luxurious, you're forming a home with this person for you to go to when you're not at work. It is the stable foundation for your life, which is why cities that have problems with homelessness sometimes focus on housing first programs as the primary stabilizer in an adult person's life. You have to have your housing domestic setting first before you add other things to your quality of life. In addition to having someone to share a bed with, it's also about sharing meals together, which enhances food and well-being. It's about having a confidant, because there is a time and place for where we say things. We have to censor ourselves so much in the workplace and even with friends to some degree, that it's behind the closed doors of our own home with our partner that we can be the most frank and candid and honest and vulnerable and silly and uncensored. And partners provide emotional support just for companionship first, and then perhaps as a source of feedback or advice when you have questions about work or family or life. They can be your sounding board for ideas or questions, dilemmas that you face, frustrations that you want to just vent about, and they can help provide what therapists call reality testing for your perception, so that you can check yourself from being depressed or anxious or paranoid or unreasonable about a situation. Have you ever asked your partner, am I crazy, or was that person rude to me earlier tonight? It's the reality testing or reality check that your partner can provide. Partners provide inherent financial stability to the society at large. Back in the United States during the George W. Bush presidency, the second Bush, he pushed for federal money simply to support marriage. Just support marriage through government agencies. The rationale being that married people who supported each other stabilized Americans and therefore communities, and this led to decreased draw on public taxpayer-funded aid programs, which Republicans never like to fund anyway, even for those in need. And having a partner can mean still having a roof over your head, even if you're sick or injured, or investing for the long term by going to school full-time, raising children as a stay-at-home parent, or getting a small business off the ground in its earliest and unprofitable stages. It's the basic adage, which is generally true, that two can live as cheaply as one. That's largely true. So that's why marriage or even cohabitation stabilizes the people that are involved. And if you do that enough, it stabilizes communities and whole countries. And so it can have bipartisan support in the United States because it's good fiscal policy, and of course it's good, human policy. But that's not to diss single people. That's kind of another topic, and maybe I don't focus on single people enough. And if that's so, you can feel free to tell me, and we'll do some topics about single people versus people in relationships. But in addition to everything else, having a partner can stabilize you financially, and I think this is especially true as time goes on and you amass financial security together. We've talked about gay men and money in other episodes, and I encourage you to listen to those because just like your health and your home, your finances need special attention to be stabilized, and that's true at every income level. So partners can also encourage and troubleshoot issues that you're facing, give you profound basic emotional support, and advise you, even on your role at work, giving you a way to process what's going on with situations and personalities in the workplace at home so you can go back to work well prepared to deal with whatever's going on. You can kind of rehearse. I've helped my husband rehearse for job interviews or for difficult conversations that he has to have with a boss or an employer. Sometimes you role play and you can rehearse these things at home with a partner. Louise Hay, a motivational speaker and author who's passed away now, but she first became famous in the 80s as a middle-aged woman. And she used to lecture on many important topics, and one of these was the importance of providing yourself a stable, safe, comfortable, joyous home to live in. And this was more than just about the dwelling itself, although she used to like to say she likes light and airy spaces. But it's about the home that you create with a partner, which is more of an emotional structure than a brick and mortar one. Being able to come home from the cruel, cold world and shut the door behind you and let your hair down is a way to find safety and a sense of sanctuary that's all about your sense of self and opportunities for your own self-expression by how you decorate the space with images and objects and colors and materials that are somehow uplifting to you. I have an eccentric way of decorating, and that's kind of fun. It's like if you ever watch the Addams Family or something. It's just, I let my eccentricity come out at home because I have antique collectibles. My husband and I both like odd things to kind of put around that are decorative, that kind of have a story behind them. Souvenirs from travel or family heirlooms that have stories behind them, because I think it just kind of adds something. So part of your home should be an expression of yourself. Like, I work with a couple of Hollywood set designers, and one of the things they talk about is they talk about reading a script and looking at the character and saying, what kind of set or dwelling would this person live in? You know, think of classics like The Little House in Queens and All in the Family, the groundbreaking sitcom of the 70s. Or think about the house in Miami that the Golden Girls lived in, and, you know, how that was decorated with kind of a semi-tropical theme. And it kind of looks like 4 old ladies in Florida live there. So think about for yourself, what does a home look like emotionally in terms of the energy that you want to create within the dwelling? And how do you create that space with a partner? Is it a welcoming and positive atmosphere, in part based on what you surround yourself with? I have a rule in my house, which is a little strange, but I don't allow heterosexual images. We're so bombarded with heteronormativity that I like to depict either same-sex pairings of some kind or just images that don't involve heterosexual people, except for, you know, portraits or photos of our respective parents or siblings or something like that. We do have that. But in terms of art that's on the wall, topically, it's devoid of heterosexual love, because we don't believe that heteronormative pressure should be everywhere. It's everywhere in society, but in our home we like to kind of make it decidedly not heteronormative, and that's very validating as a gay couple. You know, Heinz Kohut, K-O-H-U-T, was a therapist and an author and theorist, and he said that humans benefit psychologically from a sense of mirroring, you know, seeing ourselves reflected in other people. This is why similar people, such as gay men, tend to hang out with one another, to form groups that are mutually validating and from a sense of affinity together. With small groups of friends or colleagues, you know, they can be this way at work, or if you look at universities, the groups of people that tend to hang out with one another. And partners can be this way too. You know, we tend to partner up with people we find profoundly compatible, either because of our similarities or sometimes because of the harmony of our yin and yang contrasts that we bring to one another. So when we partner and share a relationship, and usually some kind of home dwelling, it's an opportunity to have our healthy narcissistic needs met. You know, we all know about the unhealthy needs of someone with narcissistic personality disorder, like Donald Trump, but there is such a thing as getting our healthy narcissistic needs met, which includes things like to share our feelings, to receive validation for our basic worth, to feel loved and appreciated by another, to be admired or cherished in healthy, nurturing ways by others, to feel heard and understood, to feel comforted and worthy of being comforted, to feel desired for our mind and heart and body and spirit, and to feel like we are living lives of meaning and purpose. Esther Perel, Perel, she's a licensed marriage and family therapist in New York City and an author and a TED Talk media sensation, if you've seen her on YouTube. And she has a well-deserved popularity for her very entertaining and insightful writing and speaking about relationships and her wonderful French-sounding Belgian accent. And she makes the point that often our partners or spouses have a big job because they are expected to meet all of these needs, confidant, friend, colleague, roommate, lover, etc., when we live twice as long as in generations ago. Getting our needs met can require the presence and the essence and efforts of others besides our primary partner, but they are usually the ones at home with us, our partners. And so much of these roles tend to fall to them for us, and of course us for them. And that's just the emotional needs being met. Let's look at number 2, the sexual needs. Okay, the second great set of needs, sexual, can be especially fraught. Not only because sexual needs combine the physical and emotional and domestic and social, but also because it's a constantly evolving dynamic between two or more domestic partners and our relative strengths and vulnerabilities and thoughts and feelings and situations, as well as our changing bodies over a lifetime, our changing environment in which we live socially and economically and historically. You know, think about how, if you've lived in the same place for a while, think about how it's changed. You know, if you had a photo of where you live now from 20 years ago, what would be different about it? Here in West Hollywood, we have vast differences between now and when I first came to West Hollywood in the 1980s. And of course, the sexual life also involves our hearts and minds and other organs in our bodies that change over the course of a human lifespan. So getting our sexual needs met in the context of relationship is not a kind of set it and forget it kind of thing. We have to accept and even expect and embrace that there will be changes over time, and we need to make that okay. When I work with gay men in their 20s who are forming relationships, I know, probably more than they realize, that the things they think and feel and say today are probably going to mortify them if we tape record them and play them back in 20 years. You know, attitudes about sex and work and finances and health and friends and family and romance itself are very likely to change as people, in this case gay men, progress through some very predictable adult phases of life. Part of my work with gay male couples who are this young includes getting them to embrace principles and skills such as commitment, communication, and compromise. There's an episode on that. And commitment and communication and compromise will serve them, hopefully, in the same relationship, but at later stages of life, long after our work together in couples therapy or relationship coaching is done. You know, I love seeing couples that I treated 10 or 15 years ago in the supermarket, and they see me and they laugh at seeing me and they say, "Hey, Ken, look, I guess our work worked, huh? Because we're still together here." You know, as I see their graying temples and their midlife dad bods from what once was these two twinks, ruling West Hollywood. So that's very rewarding to see, because just like the old AA saying, keep coming back, it works if you work it, couples therapy and relationship coaching are kind of the same way too. You do that kind of work, and the admittedly considerable investment it is in time and money and effort, but it does tend to pay off in the long term because those communication skills are very enduring. You don't tend to lose them once you master them. You know, as an ASECT, AASECT, American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists in the United States, certified sex therapist, helping gay male couples in sex therapy is a big portion of my weekly work. Getting your sexual needs met is sometimes a challenging alchemy of working with your body, his body, and your respective emotions and strengths and challenges. The COVID pandemic was one such environmental challenge that was the great equalizer in affecting so many people, regardless of their demographics, their age, their ethnicity, all of that, their nationality. Getting your sexual needs met is a moving target because our sexual needs can change depending on our level of physical health, our hormonal levels. I work in conjunction with urologists and endocrinologists who are MDs for my clients about the roles that hormonal balance plays, sometimes with or without medication. Varying natural set points of desire and libido. The normal range for a sense of desire or sexual libido would be considered normal with very infrequent sex, and very, very frequent sex are still considered normal. And guys are just built different ways. I've worked with guys who are comfortable only wanting to masturbate or have sex once every few weeks or a month. And then I've worked with other guys who masturbate 3 or 4 times a day because their libido is just that strong. And yet both of those guys would be considered under the bell curve of human sexual desire variation. There's differences in physical capabilities, just in terms of how you're built genetically or naturally. Different erotic interests and tastes and styles. What are your fetishes? What are you into? What do you find stimulating? And the function of how our sexuality is part of a larger well-being. I've said this in other episodes, that part of our mental health is our sexual mental health. I so often see how environmental issues, such as workplace stress, can have an impact on your sex life, or other things like having an illness, certain substances, emotional, psychological, psychiatric disorders, or their related medications and side effects can affect both your desire and your functioning sexually. So, like other needs, our sexual needs can be met through honest and frank communication, that word again, communication with your partner, on what feels good to you, emotionally and physically, and being validated for what you say, but also taking your turn in listening to your partner and validating what he says. The art of compromise is never so necessary as when negotiating how to approach mutual sexual needs. And while some couples learn to do this on their own, having a sex therapist help you is often needed. Sex is such a private thing, that one job of the sex therapist can be to educate you on how other gay couples in treatment have handled the same or similar issues, just with no names or identifying information given, because all that is confidential when you work with a therapist or a coach. But it's things that maybe you wouldn't know unless you were consulting an experienced gay men specialist, sex therapist, or couples therapist. It kind of takes one to know one sometimes. Sexual needs can vary from an ambitious need for off-the-wall, sports sex, to the very gentlest of cuddling and spooning. Often, gay male couples need the validation and education that an initial period of hot sex in a relationship is often followed by a lifetime of warm sex. I stole that from my mentor, Michael Chernoff. Michael Chernoff was a gay men's specialist in New York City for about 30 years between the 70s and the early aughts, and passed away from pancreatic cancer a number of years ago. But he was one of the few gay men specialist therapists, and one of the early ones, period, of gay men specialist therapists. And he taught me that, about how there's a very predictable pattern in most long-term gay male relationships where the hot sex that characterizes your initial meeting kind of cools down to a lifetime of warm sex. It is less hot, but it's also more enduring. So sometimes the hot sex episodes can kind of punctuate your life together occasionally, with each other and under certain conditions. Gay male vacations like a cruise or a resort or something like that are sometimes known for brief instances of hot that are achieved through the presence of others. If a gay male couple is going to have a hot three-way, they're probably going to have it on a vacation. Or, sometimes the moments of hot can be with or without your partner present. the consensual non-monogamous CNM or open couple that plays separately, and then sometimes they turn on their partner by sharing the details later of the fun that they got into, or maybe not. That's one of the variables in consensual non-monogamy, is some partners want to hear all about it because they think it's hot to hear what their partner did with somebody else, and other partners are like, nope, I don't care to hear the details, thank you very much, keep it to yourself. And it's very vivid. It seems like guys are either one extreme or the other on whether or not they like to hear details. So getting your sexual needs met can involve the usually strong, robust, and frequent desires of the young man, but these needs, while still present, might change through the lifespan as you just become an older adult or midlife or even a senior guy. Things that you and your partner liked or didn't like at one phase of your relationship can easily change at another phase. Either more conservative or less conservative, more vanilla, more kinky, more frequent, less frequent. And it takes discussion and communication, that word again, and healthy compromise skills if you find yourself with differing perspectives. And your communication helps to bridge the gap between where each of you is in terms of your sexual needs and what they are and how you think you can get them met. So number 3 is the interpersonal. One aspect of gay male relationships that I think is often overlooked is the role and function and influence of other people, such as your respective families of origin, your parents and siblings and cousins, or whoever was in your original family of origin growing up. Your separate and shared sets of friends and colleagues, and your role as a couple in the community where you live in general, and the local LGBT community in particular. We all could probably name, in every area we live in, the local gay power couples in our community, the ones with the party house, or the ones who are present at all the fundraisers, or the ones with some kind of social or political influence in town. When it comes to people who surround the gay male relationship, they each exert some kind of influence on the relationship. Think about your friends. What's their impact on your relationship? His friends. What's their impact on their relationship? Boy, I can hear that now. The friends you share. How do you relate as a couple to other gay single friends or other gay couple friends? There's a saying that you don't just marry a person, you marry their whole family, which is, I think that's been true as long as marriage has been around. You and your partner can get along great, but with so many players among friends and family and colleagues and neighbors and peers, that's a lot of personalities in the soup that can create both supportive alliances and areas of friction. Ooh, girl, I don't like her. You both probably have friends or relatives whom your partner doesn't like, or who don't like your partner, leaving you sometimes caught between them, which is often a source of arguments in couples. So getting your social needs met in a relationship beyond each other is yet another area that needs, these again, communication and compromise. The social role that your partner plays means having a +1 for events like weddings for friends or family. You become part of a social structure by joining together your family trees, which can have a cultural and historical aspect. Before we had marriage equality, marriages were the unions of families. In the medieval times, it was the unions of, kingdoms and land and all that stuff. And we're just now seeing the impact of the blending of families with marriage equality or same-sex marriage, and how that looks in a family tree. If you've done Ancestry.com, and Ancestry.com as yet, it doesn't have a whole lot of same-sex relationships that I've seen, but I added mine to my Ancestry family tree, and historically we wouldn't have that because we didn't have marriage equality. But now family trees have same-sex marriages and even children from those relationships, and it makes for a different kind of family tree, but still very important. You have an extra pair of hands to share household chores with when you have a partner. Being partnered in a way that speaks to that Companionship has been associated with, factoring in other health variables, longevity and endurance and overall health. Psychologists have really studied this, and having a partner or a spouse boosts your longevity and your overall long-term health. Conversely, loneliness has been discussed recently as a public health issue and such a detriment to one's physical and mental health just in and of itself, just loneliness. So it pays to partner up, but only when it's right. Social workers, like me, teach the person and environment theory. That means we don't all just exist in a vacuum. We are who we are by the historical and geographic and economic and social and cultural context that we find ourselves. Think about the different cultures that you're exposed to, yours, your partner's, other people in your city or town or country. A place like the United States is so multicultural, especially a big city like LA, where we have representatives from something like 200 different languages in Los Angeles. Relationships can have the illusion of appearing in isolation among two or sometimes more people, but they really form and endure and exist in a broader social context. We're not always consciously aware of how much we are influenced by this context, but sometimes couples therapy or relationship coaching can be about becoming consciously and mindfully aware of these local influences, good or bad, and how to deliberately develop adaptive coping measures for them. Are you a gay couple in a high cost of living area, like an urban area? Are you a gay couple in a small town? What's that like, to have just fewer people around you? What is the local cultural context like in the city or state or the country where you live? I see the statistics of who's listening to this podcast around the world. And by the way, thank you guys so much. It's a lot of countries, and I feel really honored that guys in a lot of countries I probably will never get around to visiting are listening. But I'm always fascinated by the cultural issues that are going on. If you ever have a chance, you want to email me some about that. I would love to pass those along about what is it like to be gay, or what is it like to be a gay couple in the countries of the world, in every hemisphere. And I think we have listeners in every hemisphere, so thank you. But I'd love to hear more about how you deal with the cultural issues, because gay is gay, but gay is different in different cultures of the world. Let's talk about putting all this together. The getting your needs met emotionally, sexually, interpersonally. Being mindful of how we approach relationships, to get these needs met, goes a long way to feeling confident and satisfied in our relationships. We do all this realizing that our partners can't meet every need. We need to live with that kind of frustration. Nobody is perfect. We might need platonic friends for certain hobbies or interests or topics. We might need professional colleagues who can speak the language of our chosen field and kind of dork out on stuff. We might need others from our own culture for certain needs, such as spiritual or ethnic or even a language compatibility. If your partner doesn't speak your initial tongue, sometimes it's fun to be able to speak the language, your first language growing up, with somebody else. We might need mentors or scholars, coaches, or teachers who have perspectives and skills outside of our partners. We might need to have exposure to those kinds of people. Straight people, I always say, have it easy because it's so gender focused. Straight women might have their circle of platonic girlfriends to hang out with, and straight men have their poker buddies or whatever. But with gay male relationships, sometimes we need gay men who are not our partners to be our friends, to meet different needs or purposes, particularly with different hobbies that our partners don't share an interest in. For me, it's motorcycling. Part of the very rapid social acceptance of marriage equality, from a majority of Americans disapproving to a majority of Americans approving of marriage equality in such a short time, is because it is the nature of human beings to form relationships. usually two at a time, usually in dyads, but not necessarily. I work with polyamorous gay male relationships in my practice. And while only recently achieving milestones like domestic partnership or marriage equality, gay relationships have always been there. There's been some great photo books out recently about, particularly gay men throughout the ages, through the 20th century, back to the 19th century when photography was invented, and then literature before that. Even things like, drawings on, Greek pottery depict same-sex relationships. Poetry, literature, a little more subtle sometimes, but it's definitely there. The recent proliferation of books or memes that feature historical photos of likely gay male couples, just validates this whole idea. We're here, we've actually always been here, and you should be used to it by now, despite how recent right-wing politics tries to imply that being gay or trans or etc. is somehow a new and unwelcome phenomenon. That's one thing they really don't get, is that there's nothing new going on. There's been trans people, there's been gay and lesbian people, there's been bisexual people all throughout history, because it's the history of humanity. LGBT plus people are human first. As Hillary Clinton said, gay rights are human rights. And she said that to the United Nations, which gave a really mixed review. Not everybody was in agreement with Hillary Clinton saying gay rights are human rights. Some of them, particularly in some of the Arab countries, were protesting that. And even the United States has protested global LGBT human rights under the Trump administration and Nikki Haley and all that stuff, it's all getting better now under Biden. But saying that gay rights are human rights worldwide is not a universally accepted idea, which is why we have to have so much advocacy and fighting for our rights worldwide. So forming long-term or even short-term, actually, domestic relationships is not in the existential cards for every gay man. One societal ill of the many that needs more attention is this idea that coupled or partnered or certainly married people of whatever gender are somehow better or more mature or more evolved than single people. Single people, gay or straight or bi, etc., seem to often get the short end of the stick, whether it's national tax policy or social status. Same thing with childless people of any gender. In these cases, sometimes it's not a domestic partner, but long-term platonic friendship bonds that form the social structure. And those kinds of relationships can help single people get their needs met too, especially emotionally and interpersonally, and to some degree domestically if you're close to your roommates. So as you approach dating, if you're single, or progressing in your relationship if you're already partnered or married, try to focus on the key things that tend to be especially important over the long term, which include getting your needs met in those important areas: your emotions, your sexuality, and your interpersonal social life. And if your needs aren't being met, this framework can give you a structure of what needs to be focused on and can help shape the agenda if you're reaching out for help from a therapist or a coach. Identifying problems or identifying your unmet needs is the first step towards solving them, and rallying the resources you need to change your thinking, your behavior, or your environment so that your fundamental needs can be better met for your long-term well-being and that of those around you. So for this kind of help, you are always welcome to consider therapy or coaching services. My colleagues and I at Gay Therapy LA would be happy to help in the U.S. or anywhere, really. You can call 01 for the United States, area code 310-339-5778. It's 310-339-5778. That's the fastest way to reach me. But you're also welcome to email me, Ken, at gaytherapyla.com, for more information or to book an appointment. And remember also, we have previous episodes, 83 previous episodes that you're welcome to listen to for free, obviously. And And there's usually a related blog article and a history of blog articles, many hundreds more, if you go to gaytherapyla.com/blog and use the search box to search on sex or relationships or finances or phrases that you want to search on. So thanks. Your ideas for new podcast episodes or new blog articles are always welcome. Also at ken@gaytherapyla.com. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.